Heartland Highways is made possible in part by Consolidated Communications offers customers high-speed internet, digital phone service, and digital TV service packages that include high-definition channels, DVR, and hundreds of sports, movies, and music channels. More information on these services is available at consolidated.com. This week's show is all about houses, from an 1889 mansion to mid-century modern to miniature.
Stick around, we'll be right back. It's hard to imagine living in a world where things like running water is a novelty rather than a modern-day convenience.
But in this story, we took a step back in time at the Dr. Charles M. Wright home in Altamont, Illinois. This home gave us a look at what was considered cutting edge before the turn of the 20th century.
Beautiful, historic, charming. 3 words perfect for describing the Dr. Charles M. Wright home in Altamont, Illinois. To the untrained eye, the late 1800s era home may seem like any other historic place, but as locals will tell you, it's so much more.
Well, the house was built by Dr. Charles Wright I in 1889. He earned his medical degree in Ohio when he moved here to Effingham County area, and in January of 1889 he commissioned this home and they started construction. There was a home here on the property before that he also lived in. It was moved across the street and he lived in it with his family until this home was done in the fall of 1889 when they moved in here. The home could almost conceivably be looked at like they just left 2 weeks ago. We didn't do a whole lot other than basic cleaning, you know, wiring, lighting, things like that, but the home is pretty much untouched from the way they had it set up and with the fixtures and furnishings in it. All the contents in the home were purchased by one of the 3 generations of the Wright family. As I said, there were 3 generations that lived here, and it's a very unique thing to have a home like this with over 100 years of one family's history still in it. Many of the fixtures and furniture are still original to the first Dr. Charles Wright.
The Wrights were a well-known family in Altamont. Volunteers say a simple tour of the home reveals volumes about the character and way of life each of the 3 generations of family that lived there maintained.
Dr. Charles I was a very methodical and detail-oriented man. He was an entrepreneur. In addition to being a doctor, he opened a bank. So between his bank and the medical practice being very lucrative, it afforded him the ability to build a home like this. Charles II, from everything we can tell about him, he seemed much more easygoing perhaps, the friendly town doctor. Everyone liked him, everyone went to him, and he seemed very, very friendly, is the best way to put it. Very simple. He wasn't, from what we can tell, perhaps his attention to detail wasn't as much as his father, Charles I. And Charles III, he graduated from Altamont High School in 1931. He went to Washington University in St. Louis, and I don't think he spent much of his time being an adult here at the home. He went to law school, and he spent 40 years away from home. So it's tough to get a grasp of his personality other than the facts of the things that he brought home with him here.
Those things Mr. Beale referred to include several collections that the 3rd Charles had displayed throughout the home. One collection in particular is quite impressive and immediately noticeable upon entering the home.
Charles III, being an attorney, never marrying, as I said, never having children, he had a lot of free time and a lot of free disposable income, so he enjoyed collecting things. In particular, he collected books. We've estimated there are over 7,000 books in the house. In addition to that, Charles III collected, I don't want to say trinkets, but collectibles from around the world, or the signified things he was interested in. He was interested in religion and history, mythology, Egyptology, and various things like that are sprinkled throughout the house and lend a bit of his character to every room in the house.
So what can you expect of a typical tour of the home?
When people come on a typical Sunday in the summer, they'll be greeted on the porch. They'll be given a pamphlet. They'll enter the main hallway. They'll be taken to the parlor, the family room we call it. They'll watch a short video that we have about the history of the house, and then one of the volunteers will lead them, or there'll be volunteers stationed in every room, and we can have the tour be on its own, or we have a guided tour, whatever they would like. But they go through each room of the house. They're told a little bit about the history of the house, what the occupants might have done at that time, what this particular fixture might have been used for, or what the occupant of this room might have done, and what era that might have occurred in. So they go through the whole 18 rooms, and they're welcome to stroll around the grounds outside if it's a nice day, and we answer any questions we can.
Beautiful woodwork, furnishings, and fireplaces make it easy to spend a lot of time in each room of the home. It's plain to see from the choices Charles I made when building the house that he enjoyed the finer things. His taste is part of what makes the Wright home unique.
Woodwork in the home. On the west side of the home, the woodwork is oak, and on the east side of the home, for instance in the room we're in, it's all cherry. There are 4 operable fireplaces in the home. 2 are Tennessee marble on the west side of the house, and 2 are Italian white marble, one just over my shoulder, with an onyx inlay. There are many decorative mantels in the home, but they are just decorative and they don't have fireplaces in them. When Charles I commissioned the home and he built it, he was very particular about the specifications that he wanted the home to look like. We still have the original house plans with his handwritten notes in the margin. We have the architect's drawings, and he was very precise about what he wanted. We have many of the catalogs where he chose many of the fixtures and furnishings still. So down to almost every detail, you can tell he was very involved in the selection and building of his home.
Volunteers hold several events throughout the year that are open to the public. So if you can't make it to Altamont to take a tour from 2 to 4 p.m. on Sundays in the summer, you may want to consider coming to one of these.
The Christmas tree event is the weekend after Thanksgiving and the first weekend in December. We have local merchants, members of the Chamber of Commerce, each bring a Christmas tree in. They put a Christmas tree in all of the 18 rooms, each decorated with a particular theme that the business chooses. And we have people come and tour and enjoy those trees. And in September, we have the wine festival, as I said. We have commemorative glasses made. And for a fee, people can come, they buy the glass with the souvenir logo with the Wright House on it. They get to taste wine and then purchase wine by the glass or by the bottle that day. Those are our 2 large fundraisers. And the wine festival, this will be its 3rd year and it's done very well. And the Christmas tree event, I believe we've had 4 or 5 years now, and it's done very well also.
The home is one of only 2 places in Effingham County on the National Register of Historic Places, the other one being the Effingham County Courthouse. Board members say they wanted to preserve the house because not only is it a unique treasure, but a reminder of the way life used to be as well.
We have a lot of modern conveniences today. You and I live in homes that have running water, and we have electric now that we have in this home. But I come into this home and I think 120 years ago, this was like our home is today. It was the cutting edge back then. It had running water. It had a copper bathtub. It had gravity-fed sinks. So really, I think it was a futuristic home in the 1890s. It had things many homes didn't, just like nowadays we have many things homes didn't have in the 1950s. So I think it's important to preserve historical buildings like this because many of today's youth have no idea what life was like 120 years ago, and this provides a unique insight into that. When we have school children come through, they're not used to a home where running water was novel instead of every day. Things like that I think is important for people to see and keep a reminder of.
Sitting along the Fox River is an interesting and renowned piece of architecture. Made of glass and steel, this home was once off limits to the public, but not anymore. Come along for a tour of the Farnsworth House. German-born architect Mies van der Rohe came to the U.S. in 1938 to serve as director of the Illinois Institute of Technology. Already recognized as a world-class architect, Mies developed an educational program for architecture students, but also designed 11 of the buildings on campus, including the renowned Crown Hall. Simplicity, clarity, and the use of beautiful materials were the elements of his philosophy that became the Mies aesthetic.
Once he developed this aesthetic, he pretty much replicated it in all of his projects. The Seagram's building in New York, all the work that he did in Chicago, all of his teachings at IIT, all follow very strictly the Miesian ethic of steel, glass, simplicity, reduction to its ultimate state.
While Mies is well known for his commercial buildings, public structures, and high-rise apartments, he also designed residential homes, 2 of which were built in Illinois. A Chicago doctor by the name of Edith Farnsworth instituted the talents and vision of Mies to construct a weekend house for her along the Fox River near Plano.
She found this site in one of her many drives out into the suburbs, out into the rural edges of Chicago, and then met Mies van der Rohe at a cocktail party and they began talking about her desire to have a weekend house. I believe at that point she had found this site, and she brought him out here, and he looked at the site and agreed to design a house for her.
The house of glass and steel was complete in 1951, but owner and architect were at odds with one another on the final product.
Shortly after the house was finished, Edith challenged the fees and challenged the design of the house, claiming that the house was unlivable, that there wasn't even a place for a trash can. But she had been privy to the design and the development of the design all along. So nobody knows exactly what happened, but there was a great deal of contention between the two of them after the house was finished. She insisted on screening in the porch. She insisted on a wardrobe, which Mies reluctantly designed. It was a classic struggle between an artist's very, very pure concept of what the work of art should be and the client who had some practical ideas about how to live with that work of art. So this house is recognized as sort of the final extension of all of his architectural philosophy, rolled into one beautiful very little house.
Edith did use the weekend house for 20 years and then sold it to Lord Peter Palumbo, who occupied it for the next 30. Lord Palumbo is credited with keeping the house in pristine condition, even restoring it after the devastating 1997 flood that brought 5 feet of water into the house. In 2003, the house was put up for auction at Sotheby's. Initially, the state of Illinois was going to purchase it for museum purposes, like they had with the Dana Thomas House in Springfield.
Shortly after the deal with the state of Illinois fell through, the Friends of the Farnsworth House, led by John Bryan, started investigating ways in which the house could be purchased privately and made available to the public to preserve it. About the same time, we got reports that there were potential buyers who were interested in moving the house. And it was at that point that the Landmarks Preservation Council of Illinois and the National Trust for Historic Preservation got together and said, we must do something about this.
And so $7.5 million was raised, and the house was purchased at auction in December of 2003 and opened for tours the following spring.
The wonderful thing about the National Trust and LPCI coming together and raising the money to buy it is that it is now a public facility. It is now open to the public, and it always will be open to the public. And I think with a house of this importance architecturally, it's a wonderful thing to have it be in the public domain, as it were, for people to be able to see it 6 days a week, all year round.
The Farnsworth House represents the ultimate extension of Mies's architectural philosophies. Towards the end of his career, when this house was built, his work became even more simple and refined.
His words for what he created here was the term almost nothing. I mean, it's basically steel and glass and travertine, and that's it. And put together in very, very simple, straightforward, clear, uncomplicated ways. All the photographs, all of the videos that you might see of the house simply don't prepare you for an actual visit. The house basically, when you're in the house basically disappears. You know you're in nature. You know you're in the middle of a wooded setting on the Fox River, but the house has just the slightest intrusion into that fact. It's almost like standing in the middle of a field along the river. You are You were elevated 5 feet, but basically the house disappears.
The furnishings of the house stand in harmony with the simplicity of its design. The dining table, desk, and platform bed were designed for the home's second owner by Dirk Lohan, grandson of Mies van der Rohe. Spending time in the house is like being in a three-dimensional work of art, but living in an all-glass house would take some getting used to.
This house, unless you close the draperies, which one can do, offers no psychic protection. It is basically open to the landscape, open to the elements, open to the river, open to the field that it sits in. And I think one has to adjust a little bit to that sense of openness and communication with nature. There's the famous story about Edith Farnsworth who got up one morning and came out in her dressing gown, and there were 12 photographers standing in the yard taking pictures of her. They'd sneaked on the property. And I guess that's the risk one takes if you're going to live in a glass house.
The opening of the house to the public has created great enthusiasm, both nationally and internationally. A resurgence of interest in modern architecture has made the house even more appealing to both the professional and casual visitor. The house has been described as one of the most architecturally important houses of the 20th century.
I think the gesture, the symbolism of the National Trust and LPCI buying this house for $7.5 million also sort of establishes the importance amongst the preservation movement for structures of the modern age. And that's the whole purchase event, I think, has done an awful lot to solidify and legitimize the importance of modern architecture.
From Plano, we crossed state lines into Indiana, where we visited the Museum of Miniature Houses. Thanks to a group of people in Carmel, these beautiful pieces were salvaged from garages and yard sales and acquired from collectors and creators to be put on display for all to see.
I moved here from Kansas City, and they have a very large, had already established a large miniature museum. And I got into miniatures here again, and Susie Moffett kept saying we really need a museum, that collections were being lost and children either don't want them or don't have the space, so they stick them in garage sales or one other vile thing. And then Nancy Lesh, who did this house, she really was looking for a home for this large house. I mean, this takes a tremendous amount of space. And so they evidently had known each other. And so by and by, the three of us got together. And we didn't have any money. We didn't have any location. We didn't really have a collection. So, you know, we were just spinning wheels for a while. And then finally, we were able to find a building, and this building. And, you know, just kept going. And the miniatures of the area actually joined the museum when we had nothing. And so we've always felt very near and dear to them for putting up some money, you know, to get us going. And that's how we started.
And those who make the detailed creations you see in the Museum of Miniature Houses are referred to as miniaturists.
To us, a miniaturist is somebody that makes tiny things in scale. We usually use 1 inch to the foot or 1/2 inch to foot. A lot of people are even doing 1/4 inch to the foot. Very, very different scales. And the purpose is to make it as close to the real thing as possible, so that your eye, one of the best ways to tell if something is done well is you take a picture of it, and if you can't tell that it's, you know, been manufactured by little fingers, then you've done a good job.
Examples of a job well done are demonstrated in the houses displayed throughout the museum's 6 rooms. Houses range from more modern to antique, like this one made in the mid-1800s. There's always something new to see, as about 20% of the houses are rotated out 3 to 4 times each year so others can be featured. A common misconception about these houses, however, is that they're just for girls or children of a certain age.
Literally, I would say 2 to 92. It's fairly rare that we have somebody come in that doesn't find some aspect of it that they really enjoy. I always say the men are dragged in and then they're dragged out because they've become so entranced by many of the aspects. And they come in thinking, oh, this is for little girls, and then they realize it's pretty serious art, and so they really enjoy it too.
The art of making miniatures has been enjoyed by many and even dates all the way back to the Egyptians.
Even the Egyptians made miniatures of items to put in the tombs for the afterlife. So it goes way back. And then in the 1800s, it became pretty popular in Europe, primarily England and Germany, and they did do a lot with, sometimes they called them baby houses, sometimes the carpenter of the estate would make this wonderful home for the children to play with. And then also in the 1700s, the French aristocracy collected very, very fine miniatures. They would have these fabulous curio cabinets and to show off their wonderful miniature items. So it's been around a long time. And then in the I would say 1970s, it started becoming a hobby. A lot of times we called it sort of in the closet because people would be doing it, making miniatures, having a house. They wouldn't tell anybody, so nobody knew that they were even doing it. And then by the 1980s, it had really become very popular. In fact, at one time it was considered the 3rd largest hobby in the world, just behind stamps and coins.
Perhaps it's attention to detail or working with their hands that people love, but all of these projects require stamina, as some can take up to 1,000 man-hours to complete. But no matter what the method is, chances are that most miniaturists enjoy the challenge.
I think it's partly the challenge, and it's also something the rest of the world sort of melts away, and you become so intrigued with it. The first thing I made was a little sewing machine, and I had 4 children still living at home, and they'd hang over me because they'd never seen me do anything with my hands. I don't even really sew. And they couldn't believe I was doing this. And yet, to me, it was a real challenge. I wanted every detail as perfect as I could make it, and I think that's true with everybody that gets into this.
The museum, located in Carmel's downtown arts district, is open Wednesday through Sunday about 49 weeks per year. They hope to add an addition soon so they can display many more mini houses.
The details in those homes and their furnishings was absolutely amazing.
I know, it looks so real you could almost move in.
Thanks for watching Heartland Highways, where every mile is an adventure.
Heartland Highways is made possible in part by
Consolidated Communications offers customers high-speed internet, digital phone service, and digital TV service packages that include high-definition channels, DVR, and hundreds of sports, movies, and music channels. More information on these services is available at consolidated.com.